the concept of the research background. And I think the research background is about the Twitter is headed is to review the issue of the user permission. So I think this research should identify the issue of the user permission or user access right is handled as according to the Western epistemological. So
Yep.
it's highlight that even needing data is better than storing data. Am I right?
Yeah, the idea behind the Western, the standard Western model is that we share data. We nobody has the idealized scientific method is that when you discover something, you share it so people can then discover more. And we don't necessarily have a fixed notion of data stewardship, as in data doesn't necessarily belong to anybody. But there are other cultures that have a very different approach to that. And in particular, things that are sacred, part of sacred or religious knowledge, or in some cases even gendered. There are people who have been entrusted as the custodian of the data, and that data is only available to a certain number of people. But it's the role of the custodian to keep that data alive. So, in fact, they do things like they make sure that they train a replacement and all sorts of things like that. But that's very much at odds with the way that a database works. Because ultimately, if you put something in a database, somebody is going to have the privileges to be able to look at it. And
So
that's no problem at all, as long as you're happy with the idea that there are people who can look at things
mm,
and they can look at everything in your database. But there are lots of problems with that apart from the notion of a cultural difference.
mm,
There's this whole problem where people get access to data and they do things with it they weren't supposed to. And the only thing that's stopping them is people saying, hey, don't do that. That's not a boundary at all. Imagine if Adelaide University encrypts its databases, but imagine that a disk drive goes into landfill and somewhere down the track, somebody pulls that out and they search through the database and they found all of your academic record, everything that you've ever done, stuff that you may or may not wish to have shared. So what we're looking at is database models that do not necessarily are not necessarily visible to even the people who are running the database. There might be aspects they might be able to conduct certain operations over the top of them with privacy preserving transactions, but the idea is you may be storing something
mm.
that you sorry, I just came in from the gym. You may be storing something that you don't necessarily know much about.
so so
Now,
uh,
there are lots of implications around this. Obviously, this is something that criminals would like a lot as well.
okay. So I have little bit confused. What is the actual meaning of leading data? Does that mean the leading data when the sensitive data is accessibly exposed physically or on the internet or other including north hard disk or desktop? Is that right?
Well, normally in the scientific world, we share our data through papers
Mm,
and data sets and books and things like that.
mm,
So, yes, when we make a discovery, we share it. And that sort of permeates everything. Think about driver's licenses.
mm,
Your birthday, for example,
yeah,
is a piece of information that could be useful for someone trying to steal your identity. So you probably don't go around telling everybody on the internet your birthday, right?
yeah.
Okay. But do you have a driver's license?
Driver have no license.
Have no license. At some point, you have put your birth date into a record somewhere for
Mm,
official government purposes.
mm,
Now, that birth date is stored there.
mm,
And right now, what that means is yes, there are protections around who is hired to look after that. And there are going to be layers of protection to determine who can use that. But ultimately, the way databases are built, somebody, if they get root access to the database, that if the DBM gets root access, then they'll be able to look at that data. And that might not be something that you want. Now, why does somebody keep your birth date on file?
They want to sell my data to the agent, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if most of what we want to know when it comes to things like age is whether you're over 18 or whether you're eligible for certain categories. So when I hit 55, which is not long off now, I will officially be classed as a senior, which is a bit insulting if you ask me, but anyway. But once I turned 18, I was allowed to legally drink in Australia. I was allowed to do all sorts of things where you have to be an adult. But nobody actually needs to know my birthday in order to do that. What they need to know is that I'm over 18. So if we store the fact that I'm over 18, then, I mean, who cares? You know, ultimately, if that fact leaks, but that means that when we look at how we construct this database, we've got the underlying data, and then we've got the facts that are projected, and we don't necessarily want to share the underlying data. Look, there's an amount of work being carried out by groups like Cybernetica in Estonia. I'll actually write this into the chat. I mean, a lot of what you're going to be doing on this project is trying to find examples of things that are working, and then building little models in databases to see what we can actually do with existing databases. This is a very exploratory project. Okay, you'll get a lot of experience with a wide range of stuff. So Cybernetica, which is an Estonian company, does a lot of work with privacy preserving stuff. The idea being that you and I can have a discussion about something and we can establish a fact without knowing exactly what each other knows. So there are a number of issues around this. There's Yao's millionaires problem, which I'm going to write down. There's zero knowledge proofs. And zero knowledge proofs are great because a zero knowledge proof, we agree upon something, but we haven't given away any information in doing so.
Okay. So actually, so we don't give any information. So that is mean the zero knowledge proofment.
Sorry, what was that last part? Does that mean?
So does you mean that we don't give any information into in every cases? So we say that case should be zero knowledge proof. Is that right?
The zero knowledge proof ultimately is that we can verify data without revealing the data.
Okay.
So I can establish, for example, that you are over 18 without needing to know your date of birth.
Okay, I see. So hitting some part, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
So there's a classic issue. Yao's millionaires problem is you have two millionaires who want to know who has the biggest amount of money. And if one of them just says, I've got this much, then there's nothing to stop the other one saying, well, I've got more. But also, they don't necessarily want to know exactly. They don't want the other person to know exactly how much they've got. So in Yao's millionaires problem, we can come back and we can say which one has more money, but we don't know by how much. And we haven't revealed the amounts. Now, this has all sorts of practical applications. The idea behind a database that doesn't share too much is we could do things like compare the graduation rates of software engineers at UniSA and University of Adelaide without giving away corporate information.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so I mean, I talk about it from a cultural aspect because that's how I came into it. But there are lots of really good business aspects. You know, does the person have the thing that you want? Do they actually have the data that you're after? But you know, you want to know that, so you transfer the money, but they don't want to show it to you until they've got your money.
Okay, I see. So
lots of things.
The similar idea can be applied on the visa. So maybe some sales receive the hotline. they don't need to see your total visa number, right? Just only need to load the part of your visa number.
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes.
see.
Yeah, and this is really handy for things like, your bank rings you up. I have this problem all the time. My bank rings me up occasionally and asks me to demonstrate my identity, and I said, "Well, you rang me. I don't know who you are."
Okay.
And then I have to ring them back.
Mm.
I have to ring them back onto another number, and then we have to do things. The idea of establishing identity without giving things away is really important. We have been running in a world where we just accept that somebody could read everything. Because we started with books. And if you break into a warehouse, you can read the books. That's it.
Okay.
And then we built databases where we allowed people, in the interests of administering it, to be able to see everything. And that was really important.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in a place where what we want to be able to do is potentially verify everything and extract key information, but we don't necessarily need to be able to see everything in order to do it. So, if I was going to break this problem down, ultimately I'd look at it as I'd sort of say modern databases are really great at storing things, but they're not so great at hiding things. And more people are concerned about their privacy and about what people do with their data.
But as a programmer, they can see everything from the database, right? Because they used to write the program to compare. So it seems to be still can easily steal the data by the programmer.
That's what we want to stop. Because yes,
but
you're totally right.
Your program, how to debug, right? You have to debug. You have to compare. Use the big data technology. Maybe you have some logic. Have some logic to performance. For example, statistics, right? How to run the statistics for the big data if you're hiding all the data? Maybe hiding the data with the star data. So
you're not necessarily hiding all the data. What you're doing is you're concealing key data. So some data you don't care about. So for example, temperature measurements. Let's say you're doing a big thing on temperature measurements. Something anybody can measure. What do we care? The environment. There are whole lots of data sets that we don't care about. What we care about is personal data.
Okay.
Let's focus this down. But the other thing is, again, don't think about it as a combination of the data we store and the things we can access. So I store your date of birth, let's say, and then what I store is an artifact derived from that tells me if you're over 18. What the programmer can access is the fact that you're over 18.
Okay.
Now, if the programmer wants to know which year you were born in, that's a different level of access. And that's a different calculation. But as long as we're keeping the stored records, as long as we've designed the system to allow that, then we can make those changes. It's really but this is what is happening right now. We've got very used to doing whatever we want with the data. The General Data Protection Regulation that's come in Europe basically says that you can't do things to data that you didn't tell people about when you collected it.
Okay.
That's a really big change. That's a really big change. Because I totally agree with you. Absolutely. If you've got a programmer, they can just go straight through the database. How do they check what's going on? So this is an approach to design. This is an approach to security. That's the way this project goes. That was my intention. In terms of what this project, there are many directions this project could go in. There could be, is it feasible to do this kind of thing? Identifying the data groups that would work with this, identifying the secondary queries that we'd have to make standard on this. Like, is there a level of boxing that we'd always want to do? Let's say your birth date. Let's say we want to keep track of which year you were born in. Is it possible for us to have aggregate data of whether you're over 18, a complete count of everybody in the database who was born in your birth year, a complete count of everybody in the database who was born on your birthday, and a complete count of the birth month without giving away your birth date? The answer is actually yes. But it depends on how we enter that data.
So is that means we create some store procedure or view function in the database, so the programmer just only to access the store procedure, no need to load
Yeah, no
data.
low level access. Everything comes in through APIs.
Or use the web API or API. So it's easy for the management to manage all the data, to keep
Yeah.
all the data security. So is that mean if I go to search some document related to the data security solution, can help me to do this research?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Look at privacy preserving calculations. Look at Cybernetica.
Yeah.
Look at secure multi-party computation, because that's a big part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Okay.
most
So
of the time, what we think about the data because we've got the data. Most of the time, the queries that we do take the data and they turn it into something else. They say, "Are you over 18? Are you over 65? Which country do you come from?" All those sorts of things. They very rarely care about the details. Nobody really cares the day I was born on, except for my family and friends who like to throw me a party. That's
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
But nobody really cares. They want to be able to group me. And if we're grouping people,
Yeah.
we can do them in a big enough group that we don't necessarily identify them. Let me talk to you for a moment about CELTs. The student evaluations we do. Student evaluations of learning and teaching, the CELT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
If only a small number of people respond to that, we don't show the results. So let's say if only 4 people write in a CELT, because that's such a small number, we might be able to work out, who did it. We don't report that data back.
So that actually the result only just two things, pass or not pass, right? Because
Well, it depends. I mean, I don't even get to see a result.
okay.
Yeah. But there are many ways of thinking about this. If you have a look at those, the best thing to do is to have a think and to sketch out some ideas. Is this feasible? What will it mean for programmers? How would we build it? How would we build a simple system? Can I put something into Oracle or Cassandra today
Yeah.
that is going to allow me to pass API access out, and
Yeah.
even just restricting the standard database access? I mean, that's not ideal because somebody can still see everything, but we're restricting the number of people.
Okay, I see. So I still have a question about the Western's epistemological. So why is it better to lose the sensitive data than to store data?
Okay, this is a question. This is a very culturally located question. For some groups, the correct storage of their data is more important to them than people who shouldn't see it seeing it. Okay, and that there are cultural groups, often First Nations people, the Pacific Northwest, and some groups of the Indigenous people of Australia,
Yeah.
who regard certain forms of knowledge, not everything, but certain forms of knowledge as being very precious and very sacred. And if you're not supposed to know it, you shouldn't know it.
Okay.
And the problem is, what this does, of course, is it makes that information fragile. From our perspective, we back everything up. We copy everything, we store everything, because we accept. Well, actually, I think a lot of people don't even think about it.
Yeah.
But the default is to do that. And I think about this from a cultural lens, but let's think about this in terms of a business. Sometimes businesses don't want their information to be shared. If they've got secret information, is it better that nobody knows about it than everybody knows about it?
For example, the security code behind the card, so they won't save that kind of sensitive data, right?
Yeah. So I mean, there are many examples. I think the best thing to do is to have a bit of a think about it, and if you can write up just like a couple of pages of what you're thinking around this and send that to me, we can go from there. I think that's probably the easiest way to go. So have a think, have a write up, and then we meet again next week to talk through it again.
Okay, I see. But I still have a few questions.
You go, go.
It's very fast. Actually, the Western epistemological is should be means that we use the research method to handle the knowledge. For example, the survey and study cases, and maybe secondary and analysis, and experience. Am I right?
Yes.
So that I in this project I can allow me to create a website or a web API to access the database to demonstration how I apply the security on those database.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest difference, I mean, we talk about epistemology is the discovery and the validation of knowledge.
Mm.
And what, you there? Oh, you're frozen, hang on. Hey, you back?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, epistemology is the discovery and the validation of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we do in the Western canon is when we discover something, we show lots of other people, and then they have a look at it and they go, "Yes, I agree with you. That is true." Okay. So that's one of the biggest differences. We share things, and that's how our scientific process goes. Other people verify it, and other people test it, and then when a lot of people have tested it, we accept it as true. Now, in the case of other systems of knowledge discovery, sometimes that knowledge is held by a very small number of people, and it is not shared. So it's not got that external aspect of verification, but it has a different mode of verification, which is culturally located.
Yeah. So that's why this project is asked me to create the survey. For example, create a question criteria from online, and then maybe for me, I will send to the Discord forum to ask someone how me to fill some question, and then so this the aim of this research is to find the data security solution for the database, right? Because
yes.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can make appointment next week.
Yes, absolutely. If Monday's a public holiday, so don't make it then.
Okay. So if I have a technical problem, can I directly go to your office to find you? Is that appropriate?
It is if I'm there. The problem is that I'm working in a number of different places at the moment.
Okay, I see. Better to send an email to make an appointment before.
Yeah, feel free to drop by, because if I'm there, I'm there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm happy to sort of talk through things with this.
Okay.
But don't be afraid to drop in. It's just I've got to apologise in advance. Today I have to be at home to look after some things while I'm doing all this. But I'm trying to be in at least 3 days a week.
Okay.
And so I should be relatively easy to find. And I'm happy to have face-to-face meetings.
Okay.
So.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Actually, I still have questions, but I'm not sure whether you have in time to talk to me.
I got a few more minutes. Give us a go.
Okay. Actually, it's just very, very fast. So I want to talking about my study plans. So also need to study the how to say that I have my study plan is we will study the logical Cassandra and Oracle. Maybe if I still have some time, we study in others. For example, MySQL and MSQL, and as well as how the security is implements both the database data, and then I have to learn how to prevent the common attack technology. For instance, flash and reload attack, buffer overflowing, and then the stack overflow attack, and then the basic SQL injection. So I try to prevent this attack.
Yeah, I guess when we ultimately, if we're looking at the a secure storage model, even if somebody breaches the database, they
Yeah.
can't read things.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so it's important to look at security, but it's also how would you keep things safe even if somebody got past? And that's when
Okay.
we start to look at local encryption and things like that.
Oh, so I should study the authorization, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, have a look at
And
that.
then do I need to study the firewall? So can
I don't
bot?
think so. I
Oh,
don't think so. I
okay.
think that's a bridge too far at the moment. If you look at authorization and you look at how you could provide an intermediate layer that, so
Mm.
there's the layer below where
Yeah.
everything's visible. We know that exists. That's just Oracle. And then there's a layer above that the programmer sees where nothing is directly visible. So
Okay.
you're looking at that security and how you protect that. So what you've been talking about, yeah.
And I found that some paper is talking about the database management system. So, so that in my surveys, do I need to create some question related to the database management system?
You should certainly have a look at them to see how they're doing it. So
Okay.
I'm going to write some notes here. Ultimately, it comes down to what have other people done and what can I learn from it.
Okay.
So as you see, that's going to cover all the other databases you've already looked at.
Okay. Okay, I see.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
you're welcome. How are we doing? Is that it? Or
I'll see you later. Okay.
you will indeed. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Bye.
Ciao.
Mm.